Hello, friends. Welcome to Kirby Russia. Today we are with Grace Asagra, the quantum nurse, who is a very interesting person with an interesting life story and very interesting takes on health. And she's also someone who was a nurse during the madness of COVID in the United States. So, Grace, thank you for being here, and we're going to get to the questions real quick, all right?
Thank you. Greetings to your audience.
All right. So first off, Grace, one thing you even told me was that people sometimes don't really understand your background. So could you tell us sort of like from real quick from, birth to becoming a nurse in the United States, how did this all happen? What's your background like?
I grew up in the Philippines, so that's where my home country is. So, and then I was already a nurse when I came here. And then I started working. And usually, when someone from the Philippines who's a nurse comes or goes away from the family, it's because we have a responsibility to help our family. And so, but when I came here, I just continued to study and study and study. So basically, that's the little brief background of like migration, And right now, I am in Princeton, New Jersey. And yeah, people thought because I speak so much about my culture, so then they thought I'm still in the Philippines. But I'm always connected there.
Well, we'll actually talk a little bit about your cultural feelings later, because first I want to talk to you about the whole going through COVID as a nurse. So could you tell us, because I've talked on my channel about what it was like sort of being, I don't know, I guess a person who works in the media in Russia, and how things were kind of actually a little bit even different between Moscow, the city, and the Moscow region. So what was it like doing nursing during COVID in New Jersey?
Well, at the beginning, generally, like in March 2020, no,
Mm.
was it 2020? Right.
2020. Mm-hmm.
Yes, 2020. So everyone is scared, okay? Like there's always a warning. Um, I never was really scared of anything. So when that was scary and they just kind of like mandated or said that we will close. So we thought we'll just be closed for a week. And that at that time I was working at an adult medical day center specializing in dementia. So I was no longer at the hospital, but I have friends and connections who, of course, work in the big corporation. So so everyone talks about it and, just get panicking, things like that. And I still even remember that at one point there was like a parade, like a motorcade, um, like motorcade that they are like praising the nurses, praising everyone
Mm-hmm.
who works at the hospital because they're saving
Yeah.
lives. And so, but in my mind, I said, hey, as nurses, we've been helping and we've been doing what we always do. And now
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you want to have a motorcade? I said, so, you start thinking of that. But everyone was scared. Even my previous coworkers, when I talk to them, they go all crazy into I'm asking them what they're doing with all the preparation and the mask and on the hazmat. So that's a general picture. But in our facility itself, we closed it,
Mm.
and
Oh,
for a week we weren't sure. We closed it so because it was a day center where the adults will come to the center, and in the evening they go home.
I see. Well, do you mean like the elderly or people with some sort of
Well,
rehabilitation or?
yeah,
Ah,
in the adult medical day center, this is really for the elderly
uh-huh.
who have some disability, and it could be mental cognition challenge, like with the dementia. But we
Oh,
we also have some who are post stroke, or so they're unable to really be free or be independent at home. So these daycares came as a response for that type of population. So, but in the evening they go home.
mm-hmm.
So that was really a great combination. And these elders are not. The family decided to, let their members do this kind of like activity because they don't want them to be in a nursing home. So that
Mhm.
was even before the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
So that's a situation. So now when we close it, everyone was of course cooperative, like they don't question why it was closed because they thought it's necessary. But
Hmm.
as it continues, the worry is that the reason why the service existed is because families needed that service. Some have to go to work, like their
Hmm.
children or the husbands or the wives. Okay, they have to go to work and they have to bring their adult seniors to be in that facility where they could socialize, where a health professional like me can manage their medications and we do social activities. So it was one of the most meaningful work that I was involved in more or less 10 years before this happened.
So was the logic basically that, okay, so say someone has dementia and they're being sort of worked on or looked after for dementia. Was the logic it would be better for them to be sort of cut free and to try to survive than be exposed to COVID, and that's why they closed it down? Like, what was the reasoning?
Exactly,
Uh,
just as you mentioned it,
hmm.
like that it's scary, that is so contagious, and then you're just going to either you'll end up with the disease, or then you eventually might even hurt your family, or eventually you might even, as they keep saying, that it will cause death, or any all the other things that they keep saying. So it was a whole panic thing of like, you know, don't if you don't want to get sick, then don't go where
Hmm.
you will be with other people. Just stay with your family.
Now
Okay, just
let's contrast this a little bit. So that's was your personal experiences there in New Jersey. But did any of your, like cousins or extended relatives, who I assume are still in the Philippines, did they have any stories to tell? How did the Philippines handle things any differently, or did they do sort of the same thing?
oh, they did the same thing,
Hmm.
and sometimes the Philippines has a way of even imitating and make it worse.
Oh,
you know, but
okay.
so, and then when I saw my family members, they're like, maybe it's here too, but they're like washing, rinsing the pesos, the money, the
Hmm.
pesos.
Oh,
They're like,
really?
they're, yeah. So like that's when I decided to speak to them and explain to them that it is not what they think it is or what they're hearing. So, but it could be as crazy as that. However, as it continued, the situation continued. What I noticed, the difference between here and there, they started to really like assert their rights, their understanding of the Philippine Constitution, that
Mm.
they can just mandate those things without explaining why, or if it's really a lawful thing to do. So but they cannot, they haven't been so strict in a way, like, harass people like what happened in many places in United States or in
Oh,
Australia.
so you mean the Philippines was more respectful of citizens' rights during COVID than the United States was?
Well, I hear that from some of my family
Wow.
members. Okay, but there's always of course situations when it's worse. But
Hmm.
in general, it was like that. But when they just actually kind of open up for the travel right now. Uh, but when I mentioned to you that they can copy more crazily,
Uh huh.
and that's true to other things. Okay, so that's why I wasn't surprised when I say to other things, whether it's a holiday celebration, or again, if the Filipinos wants to copy something from another country, they copy it and they improvise it more.
Hmm.
So anyway.
Well, yeah, that can happen in Moscow too, and it's one of the exciting things about living here is that the society is changing because for so many years everyone just wants to copy Europe, and that's why you'll see all sorts of bike paths that they have been built in these weird locations around Moscow. Right now, for the next 4 months, it's going to be impossible to ride a bicycle unless you're really committed to it. But in Europe, they do it, so we have to do it here, even though it makes absolutely no sense. But anyways, that's about Russia. That's not about you, and we're talking about you today. And one thing you mentioned to me that I thought was also interesting is you mentioned that you've been basically for your entire life very skeptical of vaccines, and that in fact, you mentioned your son was born at some point in the 80s, and even back then you were against vaccination. So in a way, you're kind of a trendsetter. You're ahead of the curve. But what brought you to that conclusion?
Early on in my childhood, as I was learning about health, and also, I wanted deep within inside of me, I really wanted to take care of sick people. So it's like I'm always learning even the indigenous ways of taking care of people. So then when I started that I wanted to be a nurse, so I asked Filipinos who are nurses already, and I would ask them, are you happy to be a nurse? And then one would say yes, and the other one would say no.
Mm.
So I'm always asking questions and observing things. Okay, then and we grew up in church as well, and in the church, not in the Catholic Church, I'm like a minority, and most people even thought that, were surprised if I say, no, I'm not Catholic. I was raised as Protestant.
Mm.
And you were kind of like given the freedom to learn that you are created in the image of a creator, of a source that, is infinite in many ways. And because of that, when I learned from from other people who have like high blood pressure, and I wasn't a nurse yet, and
Mm-hmm.
they said that, once you have a high blood pressure, your medicines, you have to take your medicines forever. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I said, no, it can't be. So I'm always questioning like that. So then I realized, and knowing about natural medicine, I have decided to acknowledge our body as the source of our protection,
Mm-hmm.
primarily because it is something sacred, and we have a sacred role to protect our body. So I thought, well, if that's the case, then maybe this our body will be our first line of defense. And then when I keep thinking and learning about um, corporations, that they can do anything. When I say corporations,
No.
multinational corporations, like selling food to people, that because of profit, they'll do anything to sell
Yeah.
anything to people. And it doesn't matter if you get sick or not. So that's when I kept thinking. And then we started as a group in the Philippines, young people. Then we started to check on that. If this medicine has all these side effects, then why would we be taking this medicine? So in short,
Mm-hmm.
I said, you know. So when I came to United States already, for my energy or my frequency, I had the opportunity to study local group study in New Jersey, and we were learning know thyself to heal thyself.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was introduced of what the story of the vaccine is, or immunization. So knowing that there's a lot of things that they place in the vaccine, and there's a lot of adverse effect, and that the whole story, even before of vaccine, is not the real story that we're being told. So I thought to myself, maybe I have to think twice, even
Mm-hmm.
for myself. And at that time, we weren't mandated that we have to get some vaccine in order to work at the hospital. Because when I came, I was working in a big New York corporation hospital. So that always was in my mind. Then, of course, I was single at the time, I didn't
Yeah.
have a child. So I kept thinking, if I want to give birth, it would be pregnant and have a baby, I better make sure that my DNA, my
Hmm.
genes, everything of me is healthy, so that I could, yeah, have a healthy child. So my mind is always moving forward, that if I have to have someone, give birth to any person, any child, and live this world, it better, maybe my best contribution is to give birth to someone as healthy as, like, my son. So
Yeah.
I that. And I'm always attracted to groups that study about health.
Yeah.
So, and with that, gave me an introduction and empowerment that I can create my way of life when
Hmm.
it comes. All
Well,
right, and so that's what I did.
well, one thing is that, especially when we talked about different groups, one of the reasons why I kind of just sort of, in terms of health, of course, I try to not have too much, prepackaged food and all that, because that's understandable that that's not going to be too good for you. But there's so many different competing theories about things. I mean, if you look at nutrition, some groups say that eating animal products is bad for you. Others say that we human beings should be more like carnivores and eat a ton of meat. During my lifetime, eggs have been evil for their cholesterol, and then they became good, and everything becomes good and bad, and even the food pyramid. When I guess you and I were very young, like the recommendation from the government was to sort of eat vegetables and grains and meat and all that in sort of equal amounts. And now the base of the food pyramid is grains and everything else is lesser. So this stuff is constantly changing. How do we find the truth? Like I mentioned, that's just nutrition alone. Like it seems like there's a million different takes on health. How do we find the truth, and why are there so many?
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many because that's part of the game.
Hmm.
And if for your viewers who are awake, and for those who really want eager to know more about their health, if one aspect in our existence here is already distorted or manipulated,
Mm-hmm.
you can expect that everything else will be distorted. So yeah, well, I remember, Tim, when I came here, they were like, coconut is like bad. It's really bad.
Oh.
In the 1980s, that was the time, right? Then I said to myself, how can it be so bad? I come from the city and the region that we grow coconut. We eat coconut 3 times a day, or maybe more.
Yeah.
So, and we have a coconut plantation all over, and there was even a oil factory. So, like, but one thing is that I could advise people. How would you know which one works for? First of all, I've noticed that if there's a lot of promotion, marketing, and then there you see it in the big screen, I'm always leery of that, because that
Mm.
means, it's just questionable. Then, however, you could explore whichever you want to try. Okay. So your best evidence or your best help is checking how you feel. Know what your body tells you. And definitely, because we are all different, expect that there is no one diet that's good for everyone. It's like, have that common sense. So when we can start really remembering that we have the wisdom, even in terms of health maintenance, health recovery. Because that's also one thing that we have sort of like forgotten, or we kind of like relinquish everything about our health to our so-called the opposite side. So when I say,
Mm-hmm.
like, for a lot of people who are freedom fighters, but if you want to really be sovereign, then be sovereign in everything.
Yeah.
Try that, or else you end up being in the hospital where they will just control everything for you. So always know that, and we're different. So people we should be different in our ways of eating. and always go to the roots of your of where you come from, because right, with physical we have our DNA, and that depends also from our background. So then that's the reason, I guess, why sometimes I crave certain food from the Philippines. I have upgraded many ways of from my food, and so all of us have a way that we can upgrade our cultural food or our ways. So yeah, and you keep looking at it also. There's a lot of misinformation and manipulation of our mind that, hey, look, it has to be low fat, and look what happened. Low fat, then it went into a lot of problems for cardiovascular situation,
Mm-hmm.
and because so when one diet is highly promoted, sooner or later there's a trend of certain illnesses.
Yeah.
So people have to start paying attention the trend, the patterns of what's happening.
Well, then
So
that kind of presents a very specific problem to America. Because, for example, is there any diet that they could recommend? Because, you mentioned about, coconuts. Well, I could say that my ancestors, probably until my parents, I guess, in America, were probably the first ones. I mean, all my ancestors are Slavic. There were no coconuts. You know what I mean? Probably my mom and dad were the first ones in the family to ever eat one. So in some ways, I don't know. Could you make a decent diet and health plan for everyone, be they African, Southeast Asian, Arab, Slavic, and so on?
well, it's well known that all of us must eat more vegetables than meat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a general already, and less processed, especially sugar, refined sugar,
Mm-hmm.
is always much better. So that's like that's good for everyone. Okay, now yeah, if it's not something that you really was raised, have fun with it, but don't go crazy that you gotta do it because
Mm-hmm.
it's what you read. No.
Yeah.
Okay, no, not like that. You always have to really, like, say, go back to your body, which for me, the one that is neglected sometimes, the people thought is, recognizing that maybe your blood type is asking you to eat something else because that's your blood type. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm noticing that even for me, that I said, oh, maybe I should eat more of this because it's my body's telling me to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So, and back to like the basics of your physical body, which is the foundation also of your emotional and spiritual body, and so on. So, and of course, another good part of your diet is the preparation. Okay, although fat is good, oil is not good. I
Mm.
will say that because when oil is highly processed, even coconut oil, it's highly processed. Imagine that it will rancidify quickly. It's like an inflammatory substance.
Hmm.
So like if you want to, just like if you want to make candle, right?
Yeah.
What can you make? You can make it from oil, from any kind of oil. You can make a candle.
Yeah.
So imagine that, putting that in your body
Hmm.
as like getting inflamed. So that's when you have now your body will tend to oxidize. So in general, I've been to the transition that at one point, especially like on the early 80s, late 70s, you're like, safflower is good, sunflower is good. So all, because that's like
Mm.
vegetarian time. Because I've been,
Well, well, in Russia, they always say the opposite because sunflower seed oil is like the super El Cheapo oil. That's in Russia, so it's kind of the peasants' cooking oil. So it's sort of looked down upon, even though I don't think there's anything that too bad about sunflowers. But so I wanted to ask then, as someone who's been sort of inside, we're talking a lot about nutrition right now, but someone who's been inside, major American hospitals and understands how the system works and all that. What is it that's really cutting the lives of Americans short? Because I personally get offended when the news media tries to convince us that it's like gun violence is killing Americans when, like, I think 11,000 people a year die of guns, but in a country of 330 plus million that's ever growing, that's such a teeny tiny amount that's less than 1%. So it has to be something health related, I would assume. Is it the sedentary lifestyle that we're not moving enough? Is it the nutrition? Is there something else that's happening? Because one thing, just again to link this program in with Russia, is every time I've taken the kids to America, back to the Midwest where I'm from, I always go there and I feel like I am a Greek god of men my age. I mean, everyone just looks so sick and so fat. And I don't mean this to be an America hater, because you're in America and you look fantastic, right? So this isn't an anti-American thing, but it's just the reality. You go to Walmart and people just look like they're already half dead. What is causing this?
Well, it's been known already by many people that, when you don't take care of
Mm-hmm.
yourself, especially eating the SAD diet, okay, the standard American diet, that's like a contributing foundation. Then, so it's even sad that it's just lately, maybe in the last 2 decades, that the doctors came on board.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I still remember that before, um, they wouldn't even recognize that the food is really affecting people's health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And but because they don't recognize that, so every illness, um, and sometimes my observation before and even now is that Americans tend to be scared right away of their any discomfort they have. And when I say is
Uh,
scared, oh no, maybe that they don't have as much tolerance like for pain. So the
uh,
minute they have something painful, they go right away for over-the-counter prescription, over-the-counter drugs, okay,
uh-huh.
medication. So because of that, then and if they cannot get that, then they go to their physician. So when the physician, not knowing about healthy lifestyle, we start prescribing. So what happened is that elders that whom I have seen, and now you could see it also maybe before they become 60, they just keep adding list of medications. So what's causing them eventually to look the way you described it is prescription, because if there's some illnesses that they cannot overcome, then it won't even inspire them to move.
Hmm.
And of course, look at the sedentary life. We tend to have a lot of reasons why we could not move. And I know others may said, oh, they move, but they're always challenged and they still don't look good. And perhaps because eventually their hormones already were so off from the very beginning. So they need a little bit more um, interventions rather than exercise, just moving. However, it's very basic. That's why we have limbs, our bodies built like this, so we can move, we can be
Mm-hmm.
active. We can be active, eat well, think well, then have that social life. And that's what happened, of course, when this pandemic came, is we're all kind of separated and we didn't have that engaged social life in a face-to-face way. So, and for a fact also that when you are not exposed outside with, and not having the sun, not having that solar synthesis, that's again really bad. And
Mm.
I see some of your videos when you were showing the audience about Russia. You're outside, even if
Yeah.
it's cold, you're outdoor.
Yeah,
So
everyone's outside, especially on New Year's. But yeah.
there you go. So it's important to be outdoor. And you can also maybe you may have the observation that the people who live too much in the city with all the, EMFs and all the technology too much around them are the ones also who don't look as good as when they're outside again
Mm-hmm.
in a little countryside where there's closer to still natural way of living or
Yeah.
helping or taking care of themselves.
Yeah, I have to say that that's like the one thing that was the revelation for me was, during COVID we had the 3 month sort of lockdown period in Moscow where we were not allowed to go to like any public parks or anything. They actually welded the gates to the park and the soccer field shut, and you could sort of like only go to the store or like the drugstore, and that was about it. And so I took the kids out to the house, and we spent the whole time there, basically in the woods. And that was when I really had the sort of awakening moment where I was like, I'm spending a ton of time outside now, and it's awesome. Because, I started working remotely, and even when the weather wasn't good, so it's like, March, or wait, when did it all start? March, April, or something in 2022? So, in April, the weather's not super great in Russia, but still, you have a coat on and some camouflage pants, and you're, clicking away on a plastic table outside, and all of a sudden you're living the good life. So, to an extent, I'm actually somewhat grateful for the COVID pandemic, because it kind of gave me this moment of revelation that changed my life. But that was for me personally. A lot of people didn't have a particularly fun time during COVID, but that's about me. But so, anyways, I just kind of was curious. Why did you start creating your podcast program? Because it's not just you. You have like a whole team of people. You're creating a lot of content. What's your mission behind your program?
Well, I really wanted to be part of the truth, right information, so that I would be able to see that people don't get scared so
Mm-hmm.
much, and then they have to learn how to take care of themselves, because I think when they don't know how to take care of themselves, then that's when they'll just follow anything.
Mm.
And when you're not healthy, that's when also that your liver and your gallbladder will be like subjected to like being fearful, because each part of our body has some emotions, that resonates to it. So, I thought, wow, this may be the perfect time, but I didn't really know how to do it. And I just kind of saw an ad to a podcast. Although
Mm.
couple of years before that, I really wanted to do something like this, but I didn't have the push to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But this time I said, wow, maybe I could learn to do that. I didn't also wanted to just talk about what you can do when you're sick, or or like talk much about the food, because I am aware that all other systems outside and nutritional or health system will affect us.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe so that's what it motivated me to really do the podcast. And i'm not such a perfectionist that, like, I know others would say they don't know what to do, they don't know how to do it, or everything's like has to be perfect. And, I'm even like conscious if I can't come up with the right words or something. But I said, hey, let me just do this, and let me just gather people. And I decided to gather the new friends whom I have from a distance, because I'm seeing, I'm that in any kind of a battle, it's good to be together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I thought maybe I should, when we see other people coming together, like when I saw one time that there was these doctors coming together, and then someone made a comment that, I wonder, Grace, what else we can do. So I said, well, how about the podcasters coming together? So then someone said, you can do that, you can lead it. I said, I can. And I said, okay, let's just do it. Let's try it. So I just kind of did that.
So if you're in a battle, you mean against disinformation or against the corporate version of health care and health issues, that kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. And all other related topics,
Mm-hmm.
whatever is happening in that current moment. Yeah, the disinformation on that we have to keep using the mask because the mask doesn't really make sense from the very beginning. Okay, as a nurse, we only use it when for some to protect us from someone infected in when we go inside a room, or if there is a patient there whose immune system is low, so we put a mask on that patient and we put a mask. But at the minute we get out of the room, we just throw it out, and then we
Mm-hmm.
always fresh one. So those things, like as a professional nurse, make sense. But yet the sad part is even the other nurses believe the whole narrative. So I thought, let's anyway, we just continue to keep supporting. So that's the main mission, is to do our part and to be able also to provide a platform and help others to be able to voice themselves, or to for their voices to be heard. And I think we did that with a number of people, from lawyers to people who before they were not part of the disinformation, and now they're disinformation in the disinformation list.
Well, to all my viewers on Tim Kirby Russia, guess what? I'm going to put a link to Grace's channel and her website down in the description because we are just about out of time. So, Grace, the quantum nurse, Grace Asagra, thank you very much for your time. This was a good one, and thank you for having me on your program. I'd be happy to come back in the future. Anyways, any closing words before we go?
Just remember that you are more powerful than what you think you are, or what they tell you you are. You are really, we have to remember that we're like multidimensional. So let's not be scared of many things, but instead really get to know who we are. And your wisdom, your experience is so valuable. So pay attention to that. And then all the rest will come your way.
All right, Grace Asagra, the quantum nurse and a true info warrior. So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you like the opinions coming out of my big fat mouth, then join up on my Telegram channel. That's Tim Kirby Hardcore on Telegram. Link, of course, in the description.